For those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, base season is in full swing, and you're probably doing lots of zone 2 miles on the bike, doing big rides on the trainer or outside. And this can also be kind of the time of year where you maybe start to question the plan that you've got, or maybe you start to get a little bit burnt out. And I always like to say this, that the plan you believe in is the plan that you're going to be more likely to commit to. If you understand the purpose for why you're doing what you're doing, you're going to be more motivated to stick with it. And so zone 2 is one of those areas where you can kind of question why you're doing it, So I'm training for 1 hour crits. How is doing this 5 hour zone 2 ride going to help me with that? Or something like that. And a lot of times we can begin to question and doubt ourselves. Is this really what I should be doing? And so I wanted to run down a list of 5 things that zone 2 can help you with that you maybe haven't thought of. And if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, or you're a pretty experienced rider, you probably know at this point that zone 2 is going to make you faster. But there's a lot of other things going on beneath the hood that maybe you haven't thought of. And as you hear these things, you might think about like, wow, I never thought of it that way. And just having that extra knowledge is really going to help you to have that purpose behind your training. So my name is Landry. I'm a coach and the senior leader here at EVOQ Bike. And here are 5 reasons why zone 2 can help you, and things that maybe you have not even considered when you're doing your zone 2 training. So the first one is that zone 2 can improve your FTP. Now, this is pretty obvious for a lot of people, but if you're a little bit newer to training, maybe it isn't. So on the surface level, you'd think, if I want to raise my FTP, I need to do more intensity. And we can kind of get caught in this trap of just piling on the intervals over and over and over again and neglecting the zone 2. And when I first started training, that was definitely my mindset. I thought for me to get stronger, I had to be going hard all the time. For so many people, they actually need to spend more time going easy. And I wrote an article about this for Training Peaks, but the best way that I can visualize it is, let's think about the best riders in the world, the top level pros. What is it that separates their training from that of like the amateur Cat 4 training? It's not necessarily that they're doing more intensity, it's that they're riding more. Now, granted, they are racing 80 days a year, but the thing that really unlocks their performance is not necessarily the intervals, it's the sheer amount of volume they ride. They're riding 1,000+ hours a year. I can guarantee you, if they were only riding 300 hours a year, they would not be nearly as fast. And so what is it that's making them faster? It's mostly the volume rather than the intensity. Now, of course, you have to have intensity along with that zone 2, but really the zone 2 is what's taking them to the next level. If you want to think about this for your training, say in 2 different scenarios, in one scenario, you're doing intervals 2 days a week and you're riding 5 hours a week. Scenario number 2, you are doing the exact same intervals, but you're riding 15 hours a week and you're spending all of that extra 10 hours in zone 2, right? Which scenario do you think you're going to be faster? Obviously the 15 hours. And what was the difference maker? It was not the intensity, it was the zone 2. And that's going to be what really improves that aerobic engine. And this is what can lead to those FTP increases, is the easy riding. And what will happen when you're doing these long miles is your body is working through what is called like the calcium calmodulin pathway, where these repeated muscular and contractions increase calcium levels within the muscles. And that signals this gene transcription factor for mitochondrial growth. And basically, the more mitochondria you have, the bigger your aerobic engine, the less reliant you become on those anaerobic pathways. And that's going to be what raises your FTP. So even if it doesn't seem like it, those repeated muscle contractions that you get from zone 2 training is hugely beneficial. And it's just practicing getting reps in the legs over and over and over again. The second big thing that zone 2 can help you with is fat burning capabilities. Now, of course, there's a ton of different benefits to this, but the main thing I would want to talk about is how that's going to improve your endurance. So there's two major components to performance for cycling, whether you're doing gravel racing or road racing or even like a little bit of crits. There's, of course, your raw engine, your raw power, your FTP or VO2 max, but there's also the endurance aspect of it. There is the ability that you have to preserve those muscle glycogen stores. So to be able to produce those high power at the end of the race, you have to have carbohydrates in your legs to be able to produce those powers. If you are bonking at the end of the race, it does not matter how high your FTP is, you're going to be spit out the back. And we talked about this on the Quinn Simmons podcast, but that's basically what he was saying. He was saying, like, you could have the highest FTP, the highest 5-minute power, but if you can't produce that after 5,000 kJs, it doesn't even matter. And there are plenty of riders, even in the World Tour, that they have the raw power to absolutely smoke one-off efforts, just as good as the best guys in the world, but they don't quite have the durability that the Vingagos and the Pogacars and the Quinn Simmons of the world have. And so by having the improved fat burning capabilities, you're able to preserve those muscle glycogen stores for when it actually matters the most. So while it's important to have the FTP and the VO2 max, equally as important is having the ability to actually preserve the muscle glycogen for when you need it. Pretty much the only way to improve that is by doing zone 2 training. You have to train at the intensity to where you burn the most fat. So that is hugely beneficial. And if you find that endurance is a weakness for you, start getting in those long zone 2 rides, because that's really good, what's going to build that durability. Another thing that would be correlated with the fat burning capabilities is actually your day-to-day recovery. So this might not be something you've considered, but I'm sure we've all been there. You do a big ride, you wake up the next day, you get out on the bike, and you're just totally empty. Like, your legs will not go. You have no energy. Maybe your blood sugar is a little bit low. And what that is glycogen depletion. Basically, you did not recover your glycogen stores from yesterday. You don't have enough fuel in the tank. So if you are more efficient at burning fat while riding, you're not going to burn through those glycogen stores as quickly. You're actually going to be able to recover better the next day because you're more efficient at fat burning. So zone 2 training not only improves your endurance, but it actually can improve your day-to-day recovery. And the more easily you can recover, the harder you can train, the faster you're going to get. So you might get to the point where you used to be tired doing 15-hour weeks, and now it feels easy because you've got a bigger base and you're able to preserve those muscle glycogen stores on a daily basis. Number 4 is your repeated sprintability. So this is for a lot of the crit racers or the cross racers out there, is your ability to sprint repeatedly. You look at a crit, it's going to be at least an hour long. And you got to have that raw sprint. You got to be able to produce a huge 10 to 30 second power at the end of the race if you're going to win the field sprint. But you forget that there are hundreds of little sprints there to be before you even get to that final sprint. And I know that I've coached a few guys like this, that they have a huge anaerobic power and a huge sprint, but they are so inefficient at clearing that lactate because they don't have the aerobic engine that by the time they get to the end of the race, they're already drowning in lactate. They can't even produce the numbers that they need to at the end of the race, and they just finish mid-pack. Really what's that related to is they just don't have the aerobic engine. And so we know that mitochondria can consume lactate whenever it is produced by the anaerobic muscles, and it clears lactate from your system. And we know that a very effective way to create new mitochondria and to build that aerobic engine is through zone 2 training. So do zone 2 training, make the mitochondria, you're going to be more efficient at clearing that lactate. And so every time you sprint out of a corner, you follow an attack, your body is using your anaerobic energy systems, it's creating lactate. Every time you coast in the pack, you have to clear that as quickly as possible to be able to do it again and again and again and again. Zone 2 training is going to give you more matches to the point where you're able to get to the end of the race, your legs feel great, you can get to the front, produce peak power, win the sprint. Zone 2 training. And then last but not least is efficiency. So we see this in a lot of the research they've done on elite level athletes, world tour athletes, that one of the biggest separators for pro cyclists compared to, say, a Cat 1 is actually efficiency. It's not VO2 max. It's not even, well, I guess to some extent it is FTP because that's related, but it's actually your efficiency on the bike. So not necessarily how big your engine is, but how efficiently can you use that energy that you're consuming. Because if you consume oxygen into the system, you have to actually translate that into power on the bike. And so the more efficient you are, basically the more oxygen you can utilize to actually create power, and you're not wasting energy. And so lots of miles on the bike, zone 2 really improves your efficiency, because if you think about it, you're just spending time pedaling over and over and over and over again. You can think of it as like you're practicing the piano or playing the guitar. You just play the guitar for 5 hours a day, you're going to get really good at it. You're going to get really smooth at it. It's the same thing with riding on the bike. If you want to become more efficient, you just got to ride the bike. And you can see this with a lot of newer riders. You can just see in their pedal stroke that they're less efficient. Their core is not engaged. You can sort of see the efficiency, just the energy leaking out of their pedal stroke, and contrast that to the guys that you see on TV. Smooth pedal stroke, core is engaged. They're not wasting an ounce of energy. And zone 2 training can be what helps you with that. And it's important when we're doing those long endurance rides to be mindful of our technique. So this is a perfect time when you're out for 5 hours to be focusing on your pedaling, your efficiency. How are you utilizing that energy? Are you all over the bike and your core's not engaged and your hips are rocking back and forth? Or are you locked in, smooth pedal stroke, glutes engaged, efficient as possible? And I know when I first started riding about 15 years ago, I watched a lot of bike racing on TV. I wanted to race the Tour. I was a 14-year-old kid. And I'd watch the way these guys rode, and I would try to mimic it. You'd see these guys ride in the front, their core's engaged. It just looks so powerful, so strong. And whenever I would go out climbing, I would just envision like I was one of those guys. And I would just try to like pedal the way they pedaled. And I think like early on, that actually helped me to become a more efficient rider. So always be mindful of the way you're pedaling. Even when you're out on an endurance ride, you can still be working on that. And that's going to translate to high intensity performance as well. So I hope that gave you a little bit of food for thought. And when you're out there for 5 hours this weekend, you can be thinking about, hey, this zone 2 is really going to be helping me with a lot of these different things. Let's extend it to 6 hours because I want to make as many gains as possible. I want to hear your thoughts below. What do you think of all this? And if you have any questions or comments, you can email me at Landry@EVOQ Bike. I would be super happy to hear from you, and I'll see you guys in the next one.